yes, I created an art form, but even more important, this art form led to a very important movement. And these are some of the things I want to talk about. It all started in 1980. I was a student in improvisation. If you weren't one of the 6 people at Second City, you had to find a different way to get up on stage. So I created this little game theater called Improv Olympic. And it had just short games, kind of like what you would see on Whose Line Is It Anyway? You know, nothing with real depth, but sometimes funny. And I even did some other things to get an audience and to get the press. Like I created identity teams. Like I had a team of rabbis called the God Squad, and a team of psychologists called Freudian Slip, a media team called Media Rare. And it was fun, and a lot of improvisers as well. But, you know, there were always problems. Like the rabbis couldn't play on Friday nights and, you know, things like that. And the improvisers were always using the same tricks, the same jokes. And I started to get bored with it after about a year. I was trying to think of something else that I could do. And I had gone as far as my training had taken me. Meanwhile, little did I know, across town, there was a man named Del Close, who was the director of Second City. And he was the one who trained Belushi and Bill Murray and Gilda Radner and all those folks. He even helped Saturday Night Live the first season. He was called the House Metaphysician. He didn't really want a title. And he was having this argument with Bernie Salins, who owned Second City at the time. It was a long-standing argument. Del wanted to experiment with improvisation. He thought it could be more than just a tool to create Second City shows, which is what Bernie Salins considered it to be. But Bernie was making millions, and so he said, no, thank you. I don't need to change things. I'm very happy with the way things are. And Del was very frustrated. And it was at this time that I sought Del out to see if I could get him to teach a class, to see what I could learn from him. I heard he had a penchant for drugs, so I offered him $200 and some pot to teach a class and to see what he did. And so he taught a class, he agreed. And he was great. I mean, he revealed the secrets of the universe to us. And afterwards, we went out for coffee, and I said, I just think there's something more for improvisation, and I just don't know what it is. And he was very surprised. He knew about my game theater, and he looked at me and he said, well, you're not a twit after all. I said, thank you, that's great. He said, well, you know, there's something I was working on in the 60s when I was directing the committee in San Francisco, and it was called The Herald, and it's basically an unteachable, unplayable structure. There's actually no structure to it at all. But if you're willing to close down your little game theater, maybe we can work on this thing and possibly change the face of improvisational comedy forever. And I said, yes, please. And that was the beginning of my lesson about saying yes, how interesting things happen if you say yes, and nothing happens if you say no. So the first thing we talked about was ensemble, because at that time, like Second City considered ensemble to be, you know, 2 people on stage doing a scene while the other 4 were smoking a cigarette backstage. And Del said, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to make everyone on stage at the same time responsible for everything. We're going to wear 8 different hats. We're going to be the improviser. We're going to be the editor, the director, the choreographer, the voiceover, the props, the scenery, you know, the poster on the bedroom wall, the little boy, you know, whatever was necessary. We're going to be on stage the whole time being responsible for the work. So that was the first thing we started to work on. And then we took some of my games and we started to plug this into this idea of what a herald should be. And one of my favorite games that we used was a time dash. It was a 3-part scene that I used to do in my old shows where we would take a suggestion like before, during, and after an event, like before, during, and after the exorcism, and I would take out the lights at the beginning, middle, and end. So we put 3 of those time dashes for the body of this piece. So you have scene 1, part A, 2, part A, 3, part A, and then 1B, 2B, 3B. So it became like 3 storylines that would then start to weave together and connect. Kind of like Seinfeld before Seinfeld. You know how you get, if you've seen Seinfeld, the storyline about the Pez dispenser in one scene and the classical pianist in another, then suddenly somebody has the Pez dispenser and it ruins the classical pianist concert. Well, maybe you didn't see that, I don't know. But anyway. It was funny. It was a good show. So we did that, and we plugged in little games around that. We started out to have an opening. An opening was a game that we learned to invent. Anything at all. It was always different. It was disposable comedy. We never did the same thing twice. And our job was to take a subject that was totally banal, like paper, and find the meaning of life, out of it, raised the level of the suggestion. The solar system once was a suggestion. So somebody came out and started spinning around going, I am the center of the universe. I am the center of the universe. And somebody else said, oh, okay, they're building a solar system. So he started revolving around that person, going me, 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 me. And then it started to become this physical solar system, a beautiful song, as well as a theme of selfishness, solipsism, self-centeredness. And those were the ideas that inspired the scenes. And they would grow and be poignant and funny and then connect. So the opening was our chance to find the thesis statement, what we were going to prove to the audience. And then we discovered that there were certain rules that we had to adhere to in order to make this thing work. For one thing, we had to say yes to each other's ideas. And then we had to add to them. We had no time to judge each other. Somebody couldn't do something and I couldn't go, well, that's dumb. I'm not going to do that. We had to say yes right away. We had to make it our own and we had to make it work. We had to treat each other as if we were geniuses, poets, and artists because we had a better chance of becoming that on stage if we treated each other that way. Take any technical mistake and weave it into the pattern because there's no such thing as a mistake. Everything is heard. Everything is used. Everything is remembered. Del used to call us the master Sufi weavers because when the Sufi weavers would teach their apprentice to weave the baskets, if the apprentice made a mistake, the master would weave the mistake into the pattern and make it a more sophisticated pattern. And that's what we were. We were the master Sufi weavers. And what we realized was that we were creating what Del and I called theater of the heart, a theater where people cherished each other to succeed on stage. What started to happen was those tenets were something we could buy into so easily that those skills started to fall off the stage. And we all started treating each other that way off stage. We had this incredible positive environment at I.O., creativity. Everyone was helping each other. There was no crime. I mean, once there was a pile of money sitting on a shelf behind the bar for a real long time. Every week I'd look and this pile of money would grow and I'd be like, whose money is this? I would even write online, whose money is this? Nobody would take the money. And I found out that it was just some team rehearsing, and every time they rehearsed, they made coffee, so they put some money thinking they should pay me for coffee. And this pile of money would just sit there, and bartenders were there, students, classes. No one ever took the money. We were making better people, basically, at I.O. Even I would never say no to anyone. If they come up to me and ask me if they could create some kind of wacky show, I would always say yes. I got some great shows out of those ideas. And that would empower people. People started feeling that I.O. was theirs. That was the difference between me and Andrew Alexander, who owns Second City. It's definitely Andrew's. It is his rules, and it's his place. But everyone started to feel like, this is my place. I can do all kinds of things. And they really started taking care of the place. That's how my LA theater was born, I.O. West, because so many of the best teachers and performers would go out to LA to try to make it in the business. And after a while, they called me and they said, we're all alone out here. We've got nothing to do. We're sad. We have no community. Why don't you just open the doors? We're all here. We'll teach. We'll perform. We'll make this theater for you. And they did. It was like a no-brainer, and I did it, and it's been successful for over 15 years already. And all the people who came out of that, and as you heard, there's a lot of stars that came from I.O. There's so many. They still play there. I mean, Neil Flynn, who's from the middle, and David Keckner from Anchorman, all those guys. I mean, those guys have a team called Beer Shark Mice. They play on Saturday nights. I could never afford to pay them, but they play because, they don't bowl. Some people bowl. These guys improvise. This is what they do. And then they hang out and drink afterwards and have fun. Then I started getting phone calls from all over the country. What is this thing? How do you do it? And I was getting so tired of trying to teach this thing on the phone that I finally wrote my book, Truth and Comedy, so that people could learn how to do it by the book. And then it started spreading worldwide. People were all excited about this change. It wasn't just little games anymore. It was truly an art form where people could work together to create brilliance on stage. Shows started noticing I.O. I started getting people hired for SNL. I work very closely with Lorne Michaels to this day and help him hire his cast and his writers. Conan O'Brien, The Colbert Report, Steve Colbert worked with me. Seth Meyers, his whole cast is from I.O. as well as Seth. And the reason they keep doing that, and then when they hire people from I.O., by the way, they keep throwing down the rope to the next group because they want to keep working with people who will treat them that way, people who will say yes to each other. Because there's nothing worse than a writing room where someone says no to your idea. Because even in our writing rooms, because we do a lot of work for advertisers, someone might just break the ice with what might be considered a lame idea, but that idea will lead to the second idea, which will lead to maybe an idea that's genius. So we never say no. We listen and we play off each other's ideas. I remember getting a phone call once from the writers at Conan O'Brien's show. They said, "Charna, you'd be so proud at what happened today. We wrote this bit for Conan, and in the dress rehearsal, he didn't like it so much because it was too close to a movie that had just come out. He asked us to come up with something else, so we went to that little door that you've seen on stage, and in just a matter of minutes, they had something else." And he said, "This is brilliant. How did you come up with this in 5 minutes?" And they said, "We're an I.O. team. We're Fish Stick." That was their name when they were with me. And what they meant was, if Brian Stack, who's the head writer, has an inkling of an idea of something that might be funny, nobody says, "No, I want Conan to hear my idea." They will look at Brian Stack and say, "All right, if Brian thinks there's something there, I know he's a genius, so I'm going to add to that idea." And then the next guy will say, "All right, well, if Stack and Dorff think it's funny, then I'm going to add to that idea because they're geniuses." And in just a matter of seconds, they truly have something brilliant. And that's what we teach people to do. Then corporations started hearing about our work and coming not only for presentational skills and whatever personal little problems I might have, whether it be conflict resolution needs or whatever, but the idea of building teams, the idea of working together, the idea of listening, and creating an environment where your underling isn't afraid to come up with an idea. They aren't afraid to be shot down. And the corporate world became very involved in the type of things that we were doing. The idea of yes and, I was being interviewed by authors. Suddenly there were books on the power of yes. This was all a movement that started at I.O. But I really knew we had a movement when these two very important calls came in. And these were the most exciting things that ever happened to me, besides being here right now. I got a call from the American Embassy in Cyprus. And apparently, if you know your Mediterranean history, the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots had been warring for like 500 years. There was a border. And so they couldn't go on each other's side. So the American Embassy asked me, would I come down and work with them, teach agreement, get them to empathize, get them to care about each other. So I thought, how hip is this, that the American Embassy understands what I do? Because I'm not teaching comedy, I'm teaching communication. And they also said, by the way, the Greek Cypriots don't speak the Turkish language, and the Turkish don't speak the Greek's language, and none of them speak English. Can you do it? And I said yes, because, again, life is much more interesting when you say yes. And I went, and I worked with each side separately for a week or two, and then I went and we worked with them together and got them to like each other, got them to care about each other, and lo and behold, the border was raised not too long after. The second most amazing call I got, and this shows how life is kind of like a herald. I was watching 60 Minutes one night, and they were interviewing the head particle physicist about the Large Hadron Collider from CERN. It was really scary to listen to. People were saying, are you going to create a black hole? They were searching for the Higgs boson or the God particle. They were trying to recreate the thing that everything came from. A week later, that very man calls me. That's what the herald's about, these connections, how desperate stories come together. And this man told me that, they're working on creating the collider, and they have physicists from every part of the world, the most brilliant men in the world. And the only problem is every one of them wants to be right. And so I said, okay, I will come and work with them. And boy, what an experience that was. First of all, they hated me in the beginning. It was just anathema to think of agreeing with each other. And even the first day, I had to give a speech much like this, and they wanted me to put my speech up on the screen and so they could type. And I was like, no, we're going to talk about listening and being in the moment. And they were like, no, put your speech up. And I was like, no, we're not going to do that. And but this is what we do. And I'm like, yeah, but we're not going to do that today. And so it was really, I could just see them all looking at each other and going like this, like, oh my God, this woman. But I did win them over, and they did grow to empathize and listen and understand the idea of teamwork, and two heads are better than one. I will also say it was the most exciting, horrifying experience of my life because I got to see things I should not have seen. I got to see the accelerator, and this thing is so huge. It's like you're a dot in front of this thing. The rest of it is underground. It's like 12 miles underground in Switzerland. And if you saw the Da Vinci Code, by the way, where they take out the guy's eye and scan it so they can get into the accelerator, that stuff's true. I had to have my eyeball scanned. I was really worried that they were going to create a black hole. And they were always scaring me, too, by the way. They would show me these videos of what would happen if they created a black hole. And, they once lost the car after we went out for lunch. I was like, oh, my God, these guys are going to create it. They couldn't fix my BlackBerry. I was like, you can't fix my BlackBerry? Really? But I did it. I succeeded. And I have to take credit for saving the universe. I have to. Thank you. It's okay. You owe me. You owe me big. Okay, I said that. So, yeah, anything after that's going to be anticlimactic after saving the world. But so I will say that everyone is doing this now. Everyone's understanding the power of yes. It is affecting everyone. And truly, I may not have saved the universe, but I do believe that because of this little art form and because of these tenets, we are saving our corner of the world. I thank you.